I'm sure most of us, when we hear this gospel each year, have images in our minds which mostly come from the Christmas cards we have received over the past few weeks, if they're religious cards. Not images of snowmen and reindeer, but of these three kings coming and bowing in front of the infant Jesus. And if you know anything, if you remember art over the centuries, that scene of the three kings coming to Jesus has been a very fruitful subject for many, many artists. But it's interesting to read around this episode, because a lot of it is just mysterious. Interestingly enough, these men probably came from the description that the gospel gives from Persia. That's where magoi, which is the word in the Greek in the original Matthew, magoi, and it's variously translated as kings, magicians, astrologers, astronomers. This translation chooses kings, but most commentators would say that magician is probably the closest to the original meaning. And of course, Persia was a land of magic. It was a place where that type of person could really make a living. And so and I always think it's ironic that you have these Iranians, which is what Persia is, Iranians bowing before this Jew. I mean, this would never happen today, that's for sure. But the symbolism there, if the commentators are correct, is really magnificent, because what they were probably laying at the feet of Jesus were not kingly gifts, presents that they had brought, but the tools of their trade, if they were really magicians. You know, magicians always have to have props, you know, black hats and rabbits and things like that. And in those days, they had natural elements like gold and frankincense and myrrh. And a lot has been made of the symbolism of those items in the writers later on in Christian history. But they could very well have been the tools of their trade, which they were giving up to the Christ. And what is the symbolism of that for us? They were giving up their means of security, their means of making a living. They were giving up things they treasured and identified themselves by. What are we willing to give up to the Christ? Or do we hold on to our self-identity? The identity that we have constructed for ourselves, which very often flies in the face of the new person that Jesus came to establish in us. The new man, as Paul says, but you know, I'm trying to keep it user-friendly. But he did come to recreate us. That's the whole thing. He's the new Adam, a new creation, a new human being in each one of us and in all of us as a community. But if we hold on to our own old identifications, self-identifications, we are going to thwart the effort of his making us into new people. So on this next to last day of the Christmas festival, this Epiphany celebration really brings it out of the beauty and the sentimentality sometimes of the Christmas story down into our own laps. If we accept the Messiah, if we accept this babe as the Christ who was eventually crucified, what are we willing to give up in accepting him? Because if we hold on to everything, he cannot work in us. He cannot work through us. And according to St. Paul in the second reading, he wants to work through us to let the rest of the world know what he has revealed to us. This mystery was made known to us by revelation. It means we haven't gotten there on our own. It's something that God, in what we call faith has had to instill in us as gift. And as we mentioned earlier, gifts are meant to be given away, not held on to. So how can we give away the gift of revelation, the gift of ourselves as new men and women, if we're still holding on to all the things that we have for our safety and security and with which we really identify ourselves, to ourselves? The Feast of the Epiphany is a wonderful festival filled with all kinds of symbolism, but it's a very challenging feast for us who call ourselves the disciples of the Messiah.